these teachings. I know you're going to enjoy his presentation today and the workshop this afternoon. Please welcome Dr. Elisha Goldstein.
This is 4. Okay. Thank you.
See what I mean?
Okay, well, geez, I feel like I've already been receiving so much already from this morning, so thank you for welcoming me here, and it's really wonderful to be back with Reverend Larry again, and I just felt like I was dropping into my heart space so much just being here, so I almost have to take a moment and just kind of be with that. Let me just make sure. So this is for 20 minutes? 20, 30, something like that? Okay. All right, great. So today the title of this talk is going to be Uncovering Happiness. It's kind of based on the evolution of this work that I've been doing. One of the things that I've loved to do, you need this? I guess I don't need that, is marry the kind of integration of mindfulness, our psychology as human beings, some of the positive psychology that's been there as well. In life, we know that there's this saying that some of you might be familiar with, of that there's 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows in life. So life has this impermanence of good moments and really more difficult moments. And some of us, just statistically in here, have experienced, if not everybody, because it's a common human experience, to experience some of those more difficult moments in life, some of those more painful moments that are there. And for some people, there might be a feeling that like happiness is something that's really far beyond the scope of life to some degree. I've met many people who have that experience. And this is a talk, hopefully, of hope in some way, that within each and every one of us, science is kind of revealing in our own experience that we have the seeds of a more enduring happiness. And when I talk about happiness, I don't mean just like positive affect, meaning like positive emotion. We're experiencing positive emotion all the time. Let's just kind of reach for the gold and put on our rose-colored glasses. I mean what the Greeks call that more eudaimonic happiness, which is that happiness that's more filled with, and some of the signs around here, filled with more purpose, meaning, and that experience of the good in life as well. And so what is this uncovering happiness about? So there's a couple different things. We have to know that in life, when there's 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows, our brain is wired to some degree towards paying attention really more towards the negative than the positive. It just is. So it's none of our fault. There's an evolutionary reason for this. And some of you might be familiar with this if our ancestors back in the day when they were standing or sitting in a field of grass, those are the ones that were sitting there pondering the wonders and beauties of the world and of the grass. And were loving that life sitting in a circle, maybe singing songs as we are today, maybe didn't last too long because they didn't actually pay attention to the dangers that were there. So while they were eating lunch, they were actually lunch themselves. And so what are we saying? Our brains are highly crafted over time, refined over thousands and thousands of years to be very attentive to the dangers and the negative things that are around us. If you're walking down the street and 5 people walk by you and say, wow, how wonderful you look, what a great hairstyle you have today, the clothes you're wearing, you look like you're glowing, and one person walks by you and goes, boy, you look like crap, what happened to you today? Which one is going to be a little stickier in the mind a little longer? Right? The good feeling lasts, maybe a few minutes, an hour, maybe max. The negative one, maybe that'll last throughout the whole day, maybe even a week, who knows? Just stickier, a little stickier. So it's none of our fault, again. We just have to know the reality, accept the reality of the way our brains are crafted. So we're going to be more inclined to pay attention to the negative than the positive. We're going to be more aware of fearful things than the wonders of everyday life, right? So many people here are really crafting the ability to be so aware of the wonders of life. I love Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a rabbi and he was a peace activist, marched with Martin Luther King, said, life is routine, and routine is resistance to wonder. So what he wasn't knowing, if there was some neuroscientist right next to him, he'd say, well, the brain actually is wired towards routine. So we're wired to kind of go in that direction. So we're wired in some ways to be resistant to the wonders that are in life. And in here, cultivating awareness of the wonders. And so the first thing we have to notice is that there's a conditioned loop that happens in our life between thoughts, emotions, sensations, and our behaviors. It's a sort of autopilot that happens. in any moment that you've experienced a trauma in your life or something difficult, whether it's an anxious reaction, a depressive reaction, or some kind of physical trauma or emotional trauma, there's a certain fusing that happens in the brain between the thoughts that are associated with it, the emotional experience we feel, the physical sensations in our bodies, and the behavior of approaching something or avoiding something that happens in that moment. All we need then is a single cue. We just need a physical sensation that mimics that. So for example, like with depression. Depression's a tiredness, a lethargia that's there. Maybe it's a certain sorrow, a pain in our heart, maybe to some degree, a numbness in the body, or anxiousness, or some kind of other physical trauma. All you need is that physical cue to happen to start those same thoughts starting to happen all over again. And so all of a sudden we start noticing our minds starting to circle those bad neighborhoods again. But it wasn't our fault. We didn't really do anything. It just started happening automatically. Anybody here been bitten by a dog before? A number of people. I raised my hand too. Yeah, absolutely. Bitten by a dog. When the next day, do you remember when if a dog would walk by you, what your experience would be? Something like this? You didn't choose that reaction, just happened automatically. So our brain's making snap judgments constantly to do things automatically. And so, again, not our fault. It's just kind of happening like that. So we're aware of the automaticity of our minds kind of circling those bad neighborhoods or falling into those 10,000 sorrows that are there. And so one of the things that we do is and so that leads to some of the negative patterns in our life, mentally or behaviorally, that keep us stuck in living the life we really don't want to live moment to moment. And so we become aware of that. So that's mindfulness. So many of you are familiar with this term mindfulness. For the past 15 years, it's been enjoying this incredible incline of interest in our culture, not just in the field of psychology, but in the field of science and also all over the place now. So mindfulness just means awareness. It's a moment of waking up. There's a wonderful cartoon which has a bunch of cows in a field of grass, and one cow is looking up and says, "Hey, this is grass. We've been eating grass." So it's like, how many things are we doing in our lives that we don't even want to do, even though, grass-fed beef is supposed to be better than corn-fed beef. But how many things are we doing in our life that we don't even want to do? Because it's just automatic. We just assume this is the way that it's going. So mindfulness is about waking up. The definition of it is awareness. It's awareness. And the now effect is really just based on a very simple quote by a Holocaust survivor, a neurologist, psychiatrist that many of you are familiar with, particularly if you've read the book. His name was Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and the quote that's been attributed to him was, "Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." So the science behind mindfulness, our experience of it is that it kind of allows us to train our brains to become more aware of that space between stimulus and response. And as we do that, we train ourselves to settle into that space and widen that space between stimulus and response. And what's in that space? Choice, possibility, opportunity for growth, really. And so we're training ourselves to more readily settle into that space. And so how does automatic decision-making and perception work in our brains? Our brain reaches back into our history, into our memory, to reference experiences, to spit out a snap judgment or decision about how we're going to perceive this next moment. What should we do with this next moment? Is this right, wrong, fair, unfair, important, unimportant, urgent, or not urgent? It uses our memories to do that. So the more we get in touch with settling into that space between stimulus and response, that space of awareness, that space of mindfulness, the more our brain's going to automatically settle into that space. Now, how many people here who have practiced any kind of, everyone here has practiced an awareness practice to some extent, has practiced mindfulness, have noticed those moments of grace almost, kind of falling into them automatically during the day at times? Okay, almost unanimously. What did you say?
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. Almost unanimously, almost everybody. So you know how this works. You know how this works in this way. So that's mindfulness. The verb of it is intentionally paying attention to the here and now while putting aside our program biases. It's engaging life fresh and new. That's how we disengage the patterns that are maybe unhealthy for us and begin to shift them by bringing on a beginner's mind to life, noticing things as if for the very first time. So one thing we know, how is mindfulness a natural antidepressant, or how is it a catalyst towards uncovering happiness in our lives? Well, the neuroscience is really interesting. The neuroscience shows that what mindfulness does is it creates this shift in your brain, in our brains, this shift in this prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is the part of behind your forehead that's involved with your executive function, your making short-term decisions in terms with your long-term goals and values in life. And it creates this shift to the left side. What's the left side associated with? The left side is associated with approaching things in life. Approaching life. It's also associated with positive emotions. The right side is associated with avoiding things in life, which is important. We have to avoid things in life. If we're walking down the street and you see a dark alleyway and a shiny blade is spinning in that sharp alley, you'll see the right side light up. Okay, I want to avoid that. That's important. But when it comes to a lot of things in life, we fall too much into that avoidance state maybe, especially our uncomfortable emotions. We want to automatically move from that. But the uncomfortable emotions that we experience, as I'll move into in a moment, are really the gold, or the juice. Our vulnerability is the juice. It's where the gold is, really. Jalaluddin Rumi, who many of you may be familiar with, said, "Don't turn your head. Look towards the bandaged place. That's where the light enters. Look towards the bandaged place. That's where the light enters." So it's this vulnerability that we want to be able to learn how to get better and better at being with in a particular way. In this way, mindfully, in this way. So that's mindfulness. So this is some of the, mindfulness also kind of cools down this area of the brain in the center that's called the amygdala that some of you might be familiar with. It's also been associated with like the fear circuit of the brain. It's really one of the more, it's the emotional center of the brain to some degree. It's the part of the brain that's contacted first when anything happens in our environment and comes through our senses. The amygdala says, is this safe or unsafe? If it's safe, then it lets all the activity go to the rest of the brain. If it doesn't, it jumps us into a fight or flight type of scenario. And so the amygdala cools down a little bit. When someone's been anxious or depressed over time, if you look at their brain, you'll see either an enlarged amygdala or just a highly overactive one. And so we want that cooling down of that. So mindfulness has been shown in the neuroscience, again, to create a left prefrontal shift, cooling down the amygdala. It's a natural antidepressant. It's a natural way of balancing the brain. So, and I remember I was talking to Larry about this a little earlier, where what's so fascinating about this is that for thousands and thousands of years, people have been practicing being present to their lives, right? That's nothing really new. This is kind of a systematic way of doing it. Then the science comes out and says, hey, this is what's going on with the brains. Everyone's like, oh, this is so cool, let's do it. It's like, oh, well, we've been doing this for thousands of years. But now, so our own experience is just reconfirming the science, that's all. Our own experience is reconfirming the science. Another wonderful natural antidepressant that's been getting a lot of press lately and has been getting more science behind it lately is self-compassion. So we have mindfulness, we have self-compassion. Self-compassion is the understanding that we're struggling in a moment, that we're suffering some uncomfortable feeling, some uncomfortable experience, with this inclination to want to support ourselves. So one thing to kind of think about right now, one of the essential questions that comes in with self-compassion is, what am I needing in any particular moment? What am I needing when I'm having a difficult moment? What am I really needing? Is it to feel safe? Is it to be accepted? To accept ourselves just as we are in the moment? Is it to be at ease? To feel a sense of peace? Is it to be happy? Is it to feel strong? Is it to get a sense of clarity in this moment? What am I needing in this moment? That's the essential question to ask. The other question to ask is, what am I wanting to let go of right now? What am I wanting to let go of right now? So I want you to think right now, we're just going to engage in a very short practice right now. I want you to think about, what are you needing more in your life right now? Not something external, like I'm needing a whole bunch of cash to fall in my lap, but which a lot of us could use that. But what am I needing more internally in my life? One of these types of examples: clarity, strength, acceptance, love, any of these, safety, security. What am I needing, and what am I wanting to let go of? Stress, negative self-talk, that self-critical mind, pain, suffering. What am I wanting to let go of? Just kind of taking a moment to think about that. I want you to reflect on that for yourself. Kind of considering that. What am I needing? What am I wanting to let go of? It's not even what am I ready to let go of, it's just what am I wanting to let go of. And there might be a whole bunch of things, but just choosing one or so. And then if you're ready, gently closing your eyes if they're not already closed, or if you want to keep them open, you can keep kind of a gaze towards your lap or chair in front of you. And as you notice your body sitting here, becoming aware of how, without even trying, your body just naturally breathes. And so as it breathes in, I'm wanting you to imagine breathing in whatever it is that you're needing. And as it breathes out, imagining breathing out whatever it is you're wanting to let go of. Seeing if you can sense that coming in on an inhalation and sense that going out on an exhalation. And from time to time, the mind will wander off onto different things. That's okay. Just notice that it's thinking and come back, breathing in, whatever it is that you're needing, breathing out, whatever it is you're wanting to let go of. And now trying adding on to this practice, placing your hand one or two on your heart. If that's not too comfortable, you can put it on your abdomen too. And continuing this, breathing in what it is that you're wanting, breathing out what you're wanting to let go of. And in a moment, we'll come to the end of this, just short practice. But prior to ending, seeing if you can do this. Seeing if you can acknowledge the choice, very active choice of being here today or just taking a minute or two to engage in this practice for your own learning, health, and well-being. Even just these couple minutes is an act of self-care, or some people might even go as far as saying self-love. So some way of acknowledging yourself for taking this time. And now bringing awareness to the face. If your eyes are closed, gently letting the light seep through, opening the eyes. How many people experience some kind of soothing or calming from that practice? Okay, again, almost unanimous in the room. Basically what was happening, if we could kind of look into your brain right there, is there was also kind of a left prefrontal shift probably happening, a cooling down of the amygdala that was going on there in that moment. One thing we know about the power of touch, that's why I did that practice, is there's a guy, Jim Cohen, out of the University of Virginia, who, and this was an experiment was done with everyone's consent. He had women go through an MRI machine, and he would go through a series of shocks with them. And so they'd be shocked, and their brain would be recording what kind of activity was going on. And so if those of you familiar with the Martin Seligman experience with shocking dogs, this wasn't anything like that. This was more mild shocks that were going on. And so that was an experiment that was done with learned helplessness, showing how dogs learn how to be helpless and how we can also learn as human beings to be helpless. That's there. And in Uncovering Happiness, we learned helpfulness, And so in this, what would happen is in those shock experiments with the women, you'd see when they were just getting shocked, you'd see heightened activity in their amygdala, that fear circuit that's there, and then they'd have them hold a hand of a stranger. And when they held the hand of a stranger while the shocks were being administered, a little less activity. When they're holding the hand of a loved one, the activity, the amygdala was way down. So there's a power of loving connection, loving touch that's there. So that experiment wasn't done with someone touching themselves, but I have to think of translating that. Loving touch to ourselves also has that same kind of soothing, cooling reaction. And we just know that through an experience. That was the almost unanimous hands going up as far as who experiences that as something that was soothing or cooling or loving connection that was there. So that's self-compassion. Another natural antidepressant, so we can bring more of that in our lives, by the way. Just little simple things like this throughout the day, or like this, or like this. We'll be doing a little bit more of this in the workshop. Another natural antidepressant, aside from mindfulness and self-compassion that science is starting to reveal, is purpose. So understanding purpose, and there's a lot of that in here. This whole place is filled with purpose. So, but how do we make purpose, truly understanding what's valuable to us? How do we turn it into something that's actionable? There's this whole field called acceptance and commitment therapy that talks about turning values into verbs. What do we value in life? Is it peace on earth? Is it commitment to a higher power? Is it making a greener planet? Is it valuing our connections, relationships, friendships? What is it that we're valuing here? And how do I make this something that's very practical, that I can integrate as a practice into my daily life? Now let me say this. The world's wisdom traditions have been doing this for millennia, right? Since the dawn of them, really, in some ways. Let me tell you something I've experienced and in interviewing many, many people on this. Even people who are deep in their spiritual faith get caught in the routine of their spiritual faith. And so what that means is I do my daily practices because this is part of my faith and what I do, but the brain starts recording them as a routine. So we lose out on the actual power behind them, and in order to bring the power back to them, we just have to remember in some way while we're doing that, bring mindfulness to it, consciousness to it, that this is something, I'm living my values in this moment. My values are actionable. Values are verbs in my life. And values also, I kind of peel off into compassion sometimes, because sometimes values are getting outside of myself. Self-compassion are what are my needs. Compassion are what are other people's needs who are struggling. I notice suffering around me with this inclination to want to support other people. We notice that when we're feeling stuck emotionally, it's a lot of me, me, me. The brain is really focused on me because it wants to fix the problem, really. It wants to fix the emotional stuckness that's there. So we're so self-focused on me, we're almost sick of ourselves when we're feeling this way. And so we want to get outside of ourselves now. How can I bring more compassion into the world? One thing we know about compassion is it creates that same left prefrontal shift. What's the difference with somebody who sees there's an experiment done with this guy? Anybody here familiar with Matthew Ricard? Matthew Ricard he got his doctorate in bioengineering years ago, and they dropped it all to become a Buddhist monk. So then he's done a lot of work with the Dalai Lama and whatnot, and he went to University of Wisconsin to get his brain studied by this guy, Richie Davidson. And so what they found was that while he was doing a lot of compassion-type meditations, he had this great, wonderful left prefrontal shift. Then he was shipped off over to Berkeley to do another type of experiment. One of these experiments was they showed him a clip of a man who was a burn victim, who had was getting his skin peeled off. Look at the response in the audience, right? Kind of like disgust, aversion, right? The body tensing up. That's all of our experience. So his experience was, it was a compassionate response. His almost instinctual response was compassionate. And so what I take from that is, what would the days and weeks and months ahead be like if those experiences we have internally, those uncomfortable feelings that our brain does that same thing, I don't want to feel that, was met with, this like, how can I support you, in this way? Or when we see people who are suffering, it's tough in our news system right now. We see, a sale at, Target, and then these people died, and then, off here, the sports score, and then, everything's kind of just like a statistic in some way. We lose we're kind of trained to lose the ability to kind of feel into the compassion that we can experience. And we don't want to be overwrought with that either, because it could be an imbalance. But we have to kind of understand what our values are and start to take conscious action with them. Or if you're already doing that, bringing mindfulness to it. And that's also a natural antidepressant, because it balances ourselves out. It gets us in touch with the common humanity that's here with everybody, no matter where a person is from. There's a common humanity. We all experience the 10,000 joys and sorrows on a continuum. And so another natural antidepressant. So we have mindfulness, self-compassion, compassion. This is all what science is revealing, right, as well. Something we've known, but science is revealing. We're putting it together in sort of a structure. If there's too much purpose in our lives, it's a little imbalanced. We need something that a lot of us as adults have missed out on for a long time or aren't naturally inclined towards, which is play. So play. What does play mean as adults? So this is something that our culture in general, we have this as kids. We know what play is as kids. And then again, life is routine. Routine is resistance to wonder. Our brain is wired towards routine. So we miss out on the play that's there. We need to be, almost as adults, recapture, be more intentional with the play that's there. If you look at studies with rats, they don't have a lot of studies of the neuroscience of play with adults, really. But rats' brains, interestingly enough, are very similar to human brains. There's a similarity in structure with them. And so when they've done experiments with rats, they have them in a few different cages, and rats are inexpensive too, and so that's why they do experiments with them. So you have one group that has a number of different rats in it, and then a number of toys in the cage. You have another group that has some rats but no toys. You have another group that has a rat, no toys. One rat, no toys. So they have them over there over a period of 3 weeks, sometimes changing out the toys, whatever, that kind of thing. And what they found was the rats that had the toys, when they, obviously this is what they do with experiments, they kind of study their brains, so they have to kind of slice out their brains to kind of see what's there. And so what they found was the rats, as aversive as that seems, this is how they study it. I didn't do the study, I didn't do the research. Is they showed increased cortical thickness in their cerebral cortex, which is involved with cognitive processing. So when you have an enriched environment full of toys and playmates in your life, you're the neuroplasticity of that, which means we have the ability to change the neural architecture, grow and strengthen it throughout our lifespan. We know that for the past 15 years. Shows an increased cortical thickness. Interesting. Mindfulness has a similar type of reaction too. And so what does that mean? Well, when they put those mice in a maze, those mice were far more efficient and quicker than the ones that didn't have the toys and playmates. The ones that didn't have the toys and playmates, not only did they not experience increased growth in cortical thickness, they showed a decrease in growth in cortical thickness. So we have to actively and consciously consider who are our playmates in this life? Are they nourishing or are they depleting for us? And what are our toys? What are our toys? What does toys mean to me? So as a kid, maybe sorry was kind of a fun game to play, but as an adult, I'm not having that much fun with it anymore. Or maybe as a kid, I used to, wrestle my friends. I don't really wrestle my friends, at least as a boy. I wrestle, maybe some girls do that too. Don't want to, right. So, certainly possible. And so we got to think, what are my toys right now? For some of us, it might be playing an instrument. For others, it might be having tea with a friend. For others, it might be watching my favorite TV show. For other people, it might be getting out and going on a hike. something I don't give myself opportunity to do very much. But we have to, again, consciously peel the lens back and say, where is play in my life? Where am I playing? Are there places I'm playing right now that I'm not really conscious I'm playing? I'm going out with friends and doing this thing, but I'm not considering that this is play for me. So again, there's a difference between doing something and then bringing consciousness to, this is what I'm doing, I'm playing right now. It's a different type of experience. Feel that out sometimes, whether you're doing something purposeful or playful. So this is like your like kind of a home practice in some way to go back and examine for yourself what play means to you as an adult and bring consciousness to that in your life. And just notice that after doing something like this, I get emails from people that say, I went out to the beach and took my shoes off, and that was the first time I've kind of done that in a while, and let the ocean kind of go on my feet, or different things kind of come up that these are things I've been doing anyway, but I never thought of them as play, and now when I think of it as play, there's something more freeing to it. It's a natural antidepressant. It's a natural antidepressant. It's a way of uncovering happiness for us. It's a way of uncovering the happiness that's always been there. Those seeds are all there. They're all there anyway. So it's about us doing things to actively uncover them and allow them to grow. The last thing, the last natural antidepressant, so there's 5: mindfulness, self-compassion, purpose, play, and confidence. How do we develop confidence in our lives with all of this stuff, or with anything that we're doing? There's a key mindset. That's the key mindset to developing confidence or mastery with anything. And that's a learning-based mindset. So life is about learning. So we've heard this metaphor before. Life is a big classroom in some way, that kind of thing. But really, the science shows that when we have a learning-based mindset, which means seeing everything as a learning experience, or having that mindset that in life, learning-based mindset says this: in life, obstacles are inevitable. They're inevitable. Setbacks, obstacles, they're inevitable. When they happen, rather than flogging myself or going into the woe is me type place, or even if that naturally happens because we get caught in that loop that I was talking about earlier, and the moment we wake up to it, we said, look where I am right now. How did I get here? And being able to investigate the obstacles or the setbacks and say, what happened? Let me learn from this. If I fall down, can I pick something up in that same type of way? From there, that's how we grow. That's how growth happens. That's how the brain begins to condition together the setback or the obstacle with something that's more positive in a way of being able to condition a learning that comes from it. So when it's referencing it, it can see that obstacle sooner. There's a wonderful, I didn't bring it here. It's in my, let's see. There's a wonderful poem in the Now Effect, which will kind of speak to this a little bit. And let me just kind of pull it up. Here it is. Some of you have read this already, because you have this. But this is a poem by Portia Nelson called 5 Short Chapters. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. I know people connect with this because I can hear the kind of murmurs in there. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down a different street. So there it is, a learning-based mindset, a learning-based mindset. That's the mindset that creates confidence. That's the mindset that creates mastery with any of this stuff. And so when it comes to uncovering happiness, we want to infuse it with that learning-based mindset in our lives when it comes to that. We want to recognize the effect of stepping into the now, of awakening in some way. That's kind of the now effect. And in doing that, integrate these elements into our lives that not only change our brains, but quite literally you'll start, and some of you already are, quite literally uncovering the happiness that's always been there and always can be there. As we even move through the 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. Being grateful for the good moments that are there, and being graceful during the more difficult moments that are inevitable in our lives. So thank you so much for having me, and really a blessing to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Got so many gems. I didn't bring any note paper or anything to write with today, but just great. And I know the workshop will continue to be an extension of that, with an opportunity to immerse in these ideas and to take them with you, take them home with you. So many great things you said. The one thing that stays with me, this idea of taking something difficult and turning it into a learning experience, a positive. And there's a line that I gave a talk one time. I don't know who. It's not my line, but the line is this: a setback is just a setup for a comeback. And I think unity really holds that sort of positive. The way to hold things in a positive light is to really know that we can turn around our experience of what happens to us in life, and that is with us. So thank you for articulating that, all of that so beautifully.